Retrieve that signal.
Alright, and just a little bit of this, and alright, that should do it. Eureka! Oh hi, I didn't think I'd be seeing you guys again. I got it to work. Welcome to What Is, the series where we ponder the question what is, and unfortunately this month I have nothing to ponder on. You see, after Shadow Mario cursed me into... Well, I don't know where I am, but I'm somewhere. Haven't been able to really do anything. The only game I brought in was Super Mario RPG, and I already kind of covered that to, you know, Hill Mario, Shadow Mario, whatever. So, yeah. I'm just stuck in here now. And the door is a definite no-go, since I opened it, and it seems to lead into some sort of black hole. I don't know what that's about, but it's not good. It's very bad. The only thing I wish I could have during all of this is a game to play.
I think I can help you with that.
Who are you? Where are you?
I'm not at liberty to say that just yet, but I can help you get a game.
Okay, but what game?
Here, I'm sending it now.
What the? Ugh. Ow, what the heck was that? It's
Resident Evil 2.
Resident Evil 2 started development right after the release of Resident Evil in 1996. It was shown at a V-Jump festival in Japan during that same year, showing footage of a cop fighting his way through zombies in a police station. Or a subway. Honestly, it's hard to tell in the footage. This cop would later be revealed to be Leon. Although this was the only character shown in the gameplay, Capcom did show art depicting a playable girl character. Her name was Eliza Walker, a motorcycle racer vacationing in Raccoon City. Well, she had some bad timing. These two would be accompanied by two companions each. Leon would have Officer Marvin, the lieutenant of the police station, and a researcher named Linda. It makes sense to have so many companions since Elsa and Leon would never cross paths throughout their playthroughs. But all of these people running around the station wasn't the only thing to find. There was talk of an armor system with certain clothes giving you buffs like decreased damage or an extended inventory. Just make sure you keep them clean, because if you take any damage it would show up on your clothing. There was a lot to look forward to, but now you're probably thinking, IG, what game are you even talking about? You've clearly gotten your games mixed up, you stupid, dumb, idiot person. And I would tell you, ow. And that this was going to be Resident Evil 2. You see, Shinji Mikami was enjoying the individual features put in this game, but when they were all put together, he wasn't happy with its sum. So, when Resident Evil 2 was around 60% complete, Mikami shut down the project, and later dubbed it Resident Evil 1.5. The dev team needed to start from scratch, building a completely new game. The police station had a major overhaul. The team decided to make it bigger and more extravagant, filled with a lot more art. A new story writer was brought in during this time and decided that there wasn't enough connections between Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil. So he reworks the character of Elsa Walker into Claire Redfield, the sister of Chris Redfield from the first game. And instead of her being a motorcycle racer visiting Raccoon City, Claire was on the lookout for her brother Chris. They kept the motorcycle though, because motorcycles are sick. After all the obstacles in the way, director Hideki Kamiya, along with Mikami, were able to steer the team into success, and released Resident Evil 2 on January 21st, 1998. And it lived happily ever after, until August of 2015, when a fan remake of Resident Evil 2 was in the works. This shook the internet. I remember sitting down next to Andromeda watching the footage, and we both said, man, I sure wish Capcom would make an official remake of RE2. The footage lit a small spark of hope for the internet. But that's all it was, hope that Capcom would greenlight a Resident Evil 2 remake. Everyone went back to their normal lives until one day Capcom dropped an interesting video where a man was standing in front of a TV screen with the words Resident Evil 2 Remake on display. That small spark quickly turned into a wildfire when the man said the immortal words of,
We do it.
Everyone was ecstatic. We couldn't wait for what was to come next. Capcom had said nothing about the Resident Evil 2 remake for a long while. Had it been cancelled? Did Capcom lie? When will we see the motorcycle? All our worries were quickly put to bed at E3 2018, where we got this video. Oh, look, it's my baby boy, he's back! Resident Evil 2 was nearly complete and set to launch on January 25th, 2019. Resident Evil 2 has had quite the history, and I love that I got a front row seat for its second half. But now that we know how it got made, the real question is, did it hold up to the hype and its predecessor? Resident Evil 2 is very similar to Resident Evil 1, using the environment to scare the players rather than just relying on the monsters to give you the spook. While Resident Evil 2 from 1998 has a very familiar camera angle and control scheme from Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2 from 2019 has been reworked to be a very different experience. Oh, also, in order to keep things from being less confusing, I'm going to be calling the original Resident Evil 2 just Resident Evil 2, and calling the remake Resident Evil 2R. Alright? Cool. Resident Evil 2R has huge enhancements from the original, while still capturing the perfected environment. Resident Evil 2 had a lot of open, empty areas to really bring home the feeling of loneliness, which ends up adding to the horror. While Resident Evil 2R has a lot of compact spaces, making areas feel more claustrophobic. These are also helped by two different camera angles. Resident Evil 2 kept the fixed camera angles from Resident Evil 1, only letting players see what the developers wanted them to see. These fixed camera angles made the environment feel much bigger, while Resident Evil 2R has adopted the over-the-shoulder camera angle, used in Resident Evil 4. With the camera closer to the player, it can make you feel closer to the dangers that lurk right in front of you, while concealing anything that might be sneaking up on you from behind. Both of these games, just like their predecessors, have amazing soundtracks. Resident Evil 2 has my favorite save room music, while Resident Evil 2R has my favorite track in the entire franchise. The track is called The Last Judgment and is heard at the very end of your playthrough. The soundtrack builds on the environment of this game world. I think with the great visuals and amazing sound design, this is how Resident Evil 2R has still made zombies scary, even though they've been pretty mainstream recently. Just gold stars all around. The music does the same job between these two titles. However, the gameplay is where they start to depart from similarity. Resident Evil 2 reuses the tank controls from Resident Evil, while Resident Evil 2R uses a more modern control scheme, like something you would see from any modern third-person shooter. This really makes these two titles feel pretty unique from one another. The controls may be very different, but the gameplay is very familiar to any Resident Evil fan. Unlike with Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2R have two very different gameplay styles. Resident Evil 2 has the exact same gameplay from Resident Evil 1, so I don't want to linger on it too long here, but I will give you guys a quick refresher. Resident Evil 2 uses tank controls to move your character around. Pressing up on the controller will make your character move forward, while pressing left and right will rotate your character in that direction. In Resident Evil 2, you will also have an auto-aim feature that can be turned on and off before starting your playthrough. Your reason for moving around this precinct is to find items and open passageways in order to escape from this horror show. Wait, no. Horror game. Nailed it. Overall, the same could be said with Resident Evil 2R. In Resident Evil 2R, you will have a third-person control scheme that a lot of modern gamers will know. This control scheme takes inspiration from games like Resident Evil 4, Dead Space, and The Last of Us. There's a lot of new items to be out on the look for in this version of the RPD, the newest item being gunpowder. First seen in the original Resident Evil 3, gunpowder is just like herbs from Resident Evil 1. You can combine and mix these gunpowders to make more ammunition. There are a large array of recipes for different ammunitions in the game. But speaking of herbs, they've also returned in this remake. They work exactly the same from Resident Evil 1. Green goes with green, blue and green heal poison, green and red make a strong healing, and finally red, blue, and green make a strong healing antidote, aka
Mega Herb.
However, in this remake, they've added a few features to
The Mega Herb.
If you consume the
Mega Herb,
you will get this little defense icon at the bottom of your screen. This will reduce any damage that comes your way. You can also make a red-blue herb mix that gives you the defense icon as well. However, this mix will not heal you. Herbs aren't the only way to defend yourself from damage. Resident Evil 2R has added new defense items. Do you remember the knife from Resident Evil 1? Well, that has been changed to a consumable item now. If you are grabbed by a zombie, you can stab them in the face over and over again until they finally take their gosh dang nap! Sorry, just ignore that. So, yeah, you can use your knife to deflect damage. It will eventually break if used too many times, so it's not a free pass. You'll still be on the lookout for puzzle items too. Puzzles make a return in the remake in an interesting way. I won't spoil any of them in this video, but I do want to call out some of the puzzles that were redesigned from the original, like the medallion puzzles, the library puzzles, and my favorite from the remake, the chess piece puzzles. I think puzzles are my favorite thing from the Resident Evil franchise, and Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2R have some of my favorites. Now that you're acquainted with everything you can find in the RPD, how will you carry them? Well, Resident Evil 2R has thrown away the 2x4 inventory system and has added an inventory upgrade item. And this item is no other than the fanny pack. This was in the original Resident Evil 2, however there was only one and you could only give it to either Claire or Leon, which I'll explain more later. There are a lot more of these fanny packs in the remake and both characters can obtain them. These packs will expand your inventory by 2 slots every time you find them. Normally these are hidden away behind optional harder puzzles, or the game gives them to you as a reward for defeating a boss. The next part of the gameplay plays into the story, so let's discuss how Resident Evil 2 handles its story. Resident Evil 2 has changed the story format from Resident Evil 1. In Resident Evil 1, you had a choice between 2 characters, Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield. While choosing one over the other affected the gameplay, in Resident Evil 2, choosing a character will change the story you are told. This allowed the main characters in Resident Evil 2, Claire or Leon, to each have an individual story, different puzzles, and challenges, but also made it possible for the characters' in-game experiences to cross paths and even influences one another's environment simply based on an in-game action or choice. These are known as A/B gameplay scenarios. If someone chooses to play Leon's A scenario, they will have a different playthrough from someone who played Claire's A scenario. It's kind of like Pokemon. Overall, they are the same game with minor differences depending on what version you're playing. The only big difference is in Resident Evil 2 that you're only getting one game instead of having to pay for 2. That's right, Nintendo, Resident Evil isn't trying to bleed me dry. These A scenarios will also bleed into both characters' B scenarios. It will work like this. If you beat Leon's A scenario, you will unlock Claire's B scenario. And if you beat Claire's A scenario, you will unlock Leon's B scenario. Let me give you an example. You want to close these shutters in this hallway as Leon to avoid zombies. Well, while Claire is going through that hallway, those shutters will short circuit, leaving Claire to clean up the mess. These kind of choices made between 2 different save files was hardly heard of back in 1998. It gave Resident Evil 2 a unique difference than other games on the market around the time. Now with that confusing explanation out of the way, why don't I tell you why our characters are in this zombie-infested Raccoon City in the first place. Leon is a rookie cop who is eager to start his first day on the job at the RPD. A few weeks ago he got a call that told him to stay away from Raccoon City, but he feels like enough time has passed and it's time to go to work. On his way into town, Leon's freaking Jeep, this guy's awesome, runs out of gas. If you couldn't tell, Leon is a complete Giga Chad. He stops by a nearby gas station and as he's filling up his tank, he hears odd noises from inside the gas station. Being the big bad cop, who hasn't even been on duty for a single day, decides that he should investigate. As Leon enters the gas station, it's hard to ignore the complete state of disarray. Again, being the big boy cop he is, Leon convinces himself that investigating is the right course of action. While looking around the store, Leon discovers a guy on the floor with what appears to be some kind of neck wound. The wounded man points at Leon and suggests something is going on in the back of the store. Leon heads to the back office where he sees a fellow officer trying to arrest a guy. He gets distracted by Leon's presence and the man bites his freaking neck off! Leon decides that, yeah, no, I'm gonna shoot that guy now. This guy just starts eating bullets. It's almost like they're doing nothing to him, or so it seems that way. But Leon's pro gamer aim pulls off a gnarly headshot that deals with whatever this thing was. He grabs the key and heads to the door to escape. Meanwhile, a girl on a motorcycle, man, these people are so cool. Anyhow, the chick on the bike is heading towards the city in search of a payphone so she can place a call. The woman heads towards the gas station, and lucky for her, there's a payphone right outside the gas station. After telling her friend about her crusade to find her missing brother, who works in the city, she hears some gunshots coming from inside the gas station. She goes to investigate the noise, which, bad choice, lady. She quickly finds herself with a gun pointed at her head. She pleads for the person not to shoot when suddenly our Gigatad tells the woman to get down, sniping a zombie right behind her. Following Leon's instructions, the woman gets in a police cruiser, and she and Leon drive away from that horrifying experience. only if they would know what's to come. While on the drive, our new friend reveals that her name is Claire Redfield, and she's searching for her brother who is a police officer in the city. Leon explains to Claire that he's a cop, well, a rookie at least, and that he was on his way to the precinct anyhow. After a few miles, our two heroes hit a roadblock. Literally. An assortment of abandoned cars are blocking the road, and the only option they seem to have is to backtrack and find a different way around. Sadly, their attempt to backtrack fails when zombies swarm the police cruiser, trapping both Leon and Claire inside. And, as if things couldn't get any worse, a semi-truck starts barreling towards them. With no other choice, they prepare for impact. Realizing the truck's cargo is some type of flammable liquid, Claire and Leon have no other choice but to flee from the car. Then, a massive explosion occurs. Thankfully for our plot, both of our heroes survive. Although now separated, Leon informs Claire that they can meet up at the police station. It'll be up to you to figure out what happens to our heroes next. On a semi-related note, and yes, that pun is fully intended, those of you who watched my Resident Evil 1 video will remember how I talked a lot about memos. I just wanted to mention that memos do in fact make the return in both Resident Evil 2, the original, and Resident Evil 2, the remake, so happy hunting. Resident Evil 2 is how I got introduced to the series. One year my mom purchased a copy of Resident Evil 2, an 8MB PS1 SD card, and a Resident Evil 2 guide. I was a youngin' who was quite afraid of the spookums, which led to me watching very little of my mom's original playthrough. A few years go by and I'm greeted with a Resident Evil game not even my mom could beat due to her being too scared of it. It's a small time Resident Evil game that not many of you may know. So I sat down to beat Resident Evil 4. I will talk more about Resident Evil 4 in its own episode, but the important thing is Resident Evil 4 is the game that really got me into the Resident Evil franchise, which was perfect timing because just a year or two later, Resident Evil 2R would be announced by Capcom. Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2R are my favorite versions of Resident Evil in the entire franchise. Resident Evil 2 had the perfect blend of horror and action for the series around the time. The RPD was a perfect follow-up to the Spencer Mansion from Resident Evil 1. The graphics also had a great improvement, mostly because I no longer believe I'm playing a cartoon anymore. Rooms are darker and the environment feels like it's in more disarray. The Spencer Mansion felt very clean most of the time, while in Resident Evil 2, it's very clear that some crap went down here. The voice acting is still so bad it's great, and
oh man. Who are you? Oh.
the way the two stories blend together is pretty impressive for a game that was made during this time. Honestly, the A and B scenarios helped Resident Evil 2 stand out in the series. Speaking of something that stands out, the tank controls still feel very dated. I already touched on this in my What is Resident Evil 1 video, so I'm not going to talk about it too long here. I still feel like these controls can turn people away from these games if they haven't played this control scheme before, but it's more of an acquired taste kind of thing. I think Resident Evil 2 is a game that anyone who enjoys horror should give a try. To experience this part of survival horror history is pretty amazing. As always though, it's a pretty spooky game, so if you don't like spooks, then I would pass on this one. Hey, Editor IG, just wanted to pop in here real quick because I didn't mention this in the video, but I always recommend that maybe you watch a video on the scary game, like maybe its very first chapter, just to gauge how scary it is so you can make your own opinion on how spooky the game is. So I just thought about that and wanted to drop that right here. Thank you. Resident Evil 2R has some pretty big shoes to fill, and it might just need to buy the next size up. Resident Evil 2R brings Resident Evil 2 in the modern age while keeping the original so close with it. Yes, they did cut a lot of enemies from the original, but I feel like they can be waved away as the game takes the general feeling of the original and does nothing but improve on it. The RPD is even more lonely in this version, while seeming like it's filled with ghosts. Rooms tell stories with scattered junk all over the place, flooded floors, broken electrical systems, and barricade doors. So just how many tried to survive this evil residence? Now it's up to you to break through these puzzles set up by others who tried to survive this horror, which will be pretty hard with my favorite part of this remake. Mr. X brings so much to this game. He finds new ways to scare me every time, and I've played this game for over 200 hours at this point. The fact that he's always lurking around the RPD is absolutely horrifying. You never exactly know when he's gonna strike, and it's always too late because you'll open a door and boom, he's just right there. He is probably the best improvement. It's great that he went from a scripted mini-boss encounter to the scariest entity in this entire game. This game feels so much better with the updated control scheme to fit its more modern counterparts. While an almost perfect remake, one glaring issue still shines. The scenario system that made the original stand out feels unfinished and not thought out completely here. There are even less connections in this remake, which makes no sense due to the fact that the original was made in 1998 and this remake in 2019. If anything, this could have been done 20 times better, but it seems to have been forgotten by the dev team. Even with this unfortunate blunder from the RE team, Resident Evil 2 R is a finely crafted survival horror experience, and is my favorite Resident Evil game from the entire franchise. So, should you play Resident Evil 2 Remake? Well, with it being at the price of $39.99 US dollars, I think the answer is a complete yes. It does go on sale a lot, so keep an eye out for that to maybe get it at a cheaper price, but I honestly believe it's worth the full $39.99. Again, if you're not a fan of horror games, don't play this one. This one's much worse than the original. It's horrifying. So, that's about it for Resident Evil 2. What is this finally back? So, yeah, if you guys want to see more of these episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notified anytime I post a video or go live. And hit that like button, as that will push these kind of videos to new people, so even more people can experience this fun. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.
Oh, we're going to have a lot of fun.